I'm sorry that we're not with you this very special Christmas Eve morning, but Carl and the boys and I are 6,000 miles away. We're 8 hours ahead of you, so our day is just about ending, and we are in Scotland. And just on Wednesday past, we were dressed with our kilts on. You will never see that. And we were celebrating my father's wedding. And many of you know that 2 years ago, my mother suddenly passed away, and now my father met a new lady. She'd never been married before or even engaged, but after a whirlwind romance, boom, my father proposed to her. And she's called Margaret. She's 20 years younger than my dad. She's a tall, striking blonde. Way to go, Dad! And I'd never met her. I'd never spoken to her until the day of the wedding and my wedding speech. And so I had fun with that speech because it was my chance to introduce myself to Margaret and let her know who this wacky son was that lived out in California. And even I was shocked at some of the things that I had to tell Margaret I'd get up to. But my boys, they think I'm cool. I'm unsure if you're ever going to meet Margaret because I kind of blamed my wackiness on the hot, reekly summers. So we had fun. The wedding was great. It truly was a perfect day. And now it's Christmas Eve. And I love Christmas Eve. It's like the best day of the year. Snow's on the ground. Well, where we come from, snow's on the ground. I guess, guys, you're enjoying the fog. But people are happy. Kids are playing. Christmas movies are being watched. There's just something about Christmas Eve. I don't know what your Christmas Eve tradition's like, but ours includes presents are all wrapped underneath the Christmas tree. We eat a little bit of pre-Christmas Day candy. When I was in student ministries, we would go out caroling and sing to some elderly people, and that was just a wonderful time to bless them. And then at just before midnight, we go to church and we have a midnight Christmas Eve service. Everything about the night is perfect. The Christmas tree's perfect. The presents all look perfect. The snow falling is perfect. And getting all wrapped up and enjoying a candlelit Christmas Eve service at midnight is perfect. In fact, it's so perfect that I think I prefer Christmas Eve to Christmas Day. Because compared to everything being right on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day is often a kind of letdown. I mean, the presents that held out so much promise, more socks, gardening gloves. What the blazes do I want gardening gloves? You know, you get some presents that need batteries, but the batteries aren't included. There's some clothes that you get, but they don't fit you or they're the wrong color. And then, to make it even more unperfect, the family comes to town. Oh yeah, the infamous Christmas Day meal. You know, Aunt Nan, she barges through the door and she wants to give you that Christmas Day kiss. She has to give you that Christmas Day kiss. Yuck! And then there's Uncle George. The stories he told 10 years ago, he's still telling today, and you've got to laugh and smile and pretend you're hearing them for the first time. And then you have to, in our tradition, dress up and smile for the Christmas Day photograph. Then you sit for the meal, and within our tradition, you have Christmas crackers. And you all hold a Christmas cracker, and you pop the Christmas cracker. And then outside of the Christmas cracker, you put on this paper silly hat. And you have to keep the hat on until the end of the meal. Because if you take it off, you're a party pooper. And then, to make it even more perfect, Grandma has an increasingly difficult wind problem. And then they serve soggy Brussels sprouts. This is not the perfect Christmas Day. Give me Christmas Eve over Christmas Day anytime. And I guess this is why George Eliot once said, "Nothing is so good as it seems beforehand." It was rather ironic that this famous English novelist then stepped forward to reveal himself to actually be Mary Ann Evans. I think that kind of funny. Well, welcome to this very special Christmas Eve Sunday morning service. If this is your first time as a visitor in our church, we really welcome you. And you need to excuse the picture on the screen because actually I'm 6'2", I'm very broad-shouldered, I've got a full head of hair, and I really only look my athletic 28 years old. Or maybe you need to come back in January when we do a series called Handling Tough Choices, and you'll see that the camera doesn't actually lie. For the weeks of December, we have been taking ourselves back to the very first Christmas and seeing that things weren't that different back then. We've tried to understand Christmas by understanding what the first Christmas was like. And we've shared lots and lots of information, which I'm a little leery of because we're interested in being transformed, not just knowing a bunch of stuff. But I want you to know the real Christmas. And maybe next year we'll get to the Bible passages that talk about the red suits on the elves. Maybe. But this morning, let me give you a little bit more information that will help us understand the emotions of the first Christmas Eve. So let's go back 2,000 years. The Roman Empire ruled. And to understand the Christmas story, you need to see how vast the Roman Empire was. It ruled from India in the east, and then it charged west and north through what's known today as Italy, Germany, France, Spain, Holland, and England. It got as far as Scotland, but then they built a wall because they took one look at us with kilts and they didn't want us invading them. The first ruler of the Roman Empire was a man called Julius Caesar. This is taking you back to your middle school history classes and you're freaking out. But Julius Caesar ruled, and then he had an adopted son called Caesar Augustus. And the Christmas story involves Caesar Augustus. He ruled from 63 BC all the way through to AD 14. Caesar Augustus believed that his father, Julius Caesar, was God. And so Caesar Augustus referred to himself as the Son of God. He had his own high priests, and you would offer incense in worship of Caesar Augustus. They sang hymns about him. And you were expected to bow down and worship him and declare that he was Lord. In fact, what would happen is his people, his soldiers, would come into your village and they would force you to bow down. And if you didn't bow down, serious trouble. In one day, one of his generals, a man by the name of General Cassius, reportedly slaughtered 30,000 people who refused to acknowledge that Caesar was Lord. There's another record in history of 2,000 villagers being crucified, which was the invention of the Romans, because they refused to bow down to Caesar and confess him as Lord. So Caesar's men had entered your village. You've bowed down and confessed him as Lord. Life doesn't get any easier at this point. According to history, the first thing that Caesar did was he began to apply taxes on those local villagers. And according to history, those taxes were 80% to 90% of everything that you had was paid in taxes to the Roman Empire. Immediately overnight, you became poor. Now, Caesar is 9 months away, journey-wise, living in Rome in his palace. How could he keep Roman rule over you? Well, history tells us that he appointed client kings, kings who were sympathetic to his rule and his reign. And as long as they were willing to pay homage to Caesar, they could stay ruling the local people. And into the Christmas story now enters the second villain. Not now just Caesar Augustus, but now a man by the name of Herod, King Herod. Now Herod was not a nice guy. History tells us that he killed 2 of his own sons. He then also took his favorite wife and killed her also. In fact, if you know anything of the Christmas story, you remember that Joseph and Mary had to flee because there was this king who was putting out an edict to kill every baby. That's Herod. He fell out with some religious leaders, and on one day he slaughtered 200 of them. And if we took the time, we could find out that Herod was kind of chipped off the same block as Caesar. And maybe that's why Caesar allowed Herod to be king of that region. But into the world of this first Christmas Eve were 2 huge villains. They were cruel, they were violent, they were vicious. And they dominated. Their rule was enforced. Their word was law. Their decisions just held sway. They were like little gods, and they knew it, and they enjoyed it. And you could do nothing about it. On that first Christmas Eve, all you could do was wait.